The coffee
I
had gone
can't
cold
believe
in
you're
his
still
hands
defending
20
this.
minutes
Because you're
ago,
not
but Marcus
listening to
hadn't
me.
noticed.
I'm trying, but you're not making
He stood at the
sense.
kitchen window of his small apartment, watching the rain trace patterns down the glass, his eyes fixed on nothing and everything at all. On the counter behind him sat an unopened envelope, cream-colored, elegant, expensive. He didn't need to open it to know what it said. Sarah was getting married, and he had never told her how he felt. Marcus Chen had been a single father since his daughter Emma was 6 months old. Her mother, his college girlfriend, had left one Tuesday morning with nothing but a note on the refrigerator and a forwarding address 3 states away. That was 7 years ago. 7 years of learning to braid hair from YouTube videos, of burning dinner more times than he could count, of parent-teacher conferences where he was often the only dad in a sea of mothers. 7 years of building a life that revolved entirely around a little girl with his eyes and her mother's smile. He had met Sarah Winters at Emma's elementary school 3 years ago. She was the new art teacher, fresh out of grad school, with paint-stained fingers and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. Emma had come home that first day of 2nd grade talking about nothing else. "Dad, Miss Winters let us paint with our fingers. And she has a tattoo of a sunflower on her wrist. And she says creativity is just organized mess." Marcus had dismissed it as typical childhood enthusiasm until the first parent-teacher night. He'd walked into the art room late, harried from leaving work early and fighting traffic, his tie askew and apologies tumbling from his lips. And there she was, kneeling beside a display of children's self-portraits, her dark hair falling over one shoulder, speaking softly to a shy student's parents about the importance of encouraging expression over perfection. When she stood to greet him, her smile had made his heart forget its rhythm. "Mr. Chen, I'm so glad you could make it. Emma is extraordinarily talented," she'd said, gesturing to a painting of their apartment building rendered in wild, joyful colors. "She sees the world in such a unique way." They had talked for 40 minutes, long after the other parents had filtered out. About Emma's progress, yes, but also about art and raising children and the challenge of finding yourself when so much of your life belonged to someone else. Marcus had floated home that night, already composing and discarding opening lines for conversations he told himself he'd never have the courage to start. But somehow, a friendship had formed. Sarah began staying late on Thursdays when Marcus picked Emma up from art club. Their conversations stretched longer, deeper. She told him about growing up in a small town in Oregon, about parents who'd wanted her to be a doctor but who'd eventually learned to love her paint-stained path. He told her about the terrifying beauty of single parenthood, about building furniture from scratch because it was cheaper than buying it, about the fierce love that could exist in a half-empty apartment. Emma adored her. That was both the blessing and the curse. Marcus watched his daughter bloom under Sarah's attention, saw her confidence grow with each art project, each word of encouragement. And he told himself that this friendship, this presence in their lives, was enough. More than he deserved, certainly. Sarah was young, brilliant, untethered. Why would she want a ready-made family with a man who worked too many hours and still didn't know how to cook a proper meal? So he stayed quiet, even when Sarah started joining them for pizza after art club. Even when she helped Emma build a volcano for the science fair, the 3 of them laughing in his kitchen at midnight, covered in papier-mâché paste. Even when she showed up at Emma's birthday party with a hand-painted portrait of Emma that made his daughter cry happy tears and made his own throat tight with emotion he couldn't name. "You're a good man, Marcus," Sarah had said that day, standing beside him while Emma showed off her gifts to her friends. "Emma is lucky to have you." He'd wanted to say, "I'm the lucky one. I'm lucky every time you walk through that door. I'm lucky for every minute you choose to spend with us." Instead, he'd smiled and said, "We're both lucky to know you." The autumn Emma turned 9, Sarah started dating someone. A fellow teacher named David, kind, successful, the type of man who wore sweaters that actually fit and knew about wine. Emma had mentioned it casually over dinner, and Marcus had felt something crack inside his chest that he couldn't quite repair. He told himself to be happy for her. He was happy for her. Sarah deserved someone whole, someone without the baggage of a failed relationship and the demanding schedule of single parenthood. Someone who could take her to nice restaurants and weekend getaways instead of asking her to help with 4th grade math homework. But the friendship continued, and Marcus learned to live with the particular torture of loving someone in silence. He learned to smile when she mentioned David. Learn to ignore the way his hands shook when she sat too close on the couch while they watched Emma's school play rehearsals. Learn to channel everything he felt into being the best father he could be, because that was the one thing he knew how to do right. Then came the night that changed everything, or should have. It was late spring, and Sarah had volunteered to stay with Emma while Marcus attended a mandatory work conference overnight. He'd been reluctant to ask, but his usual babysitter had cancelled, and Sarah had insisted. "Marcus, we're friends. This is what friends do. Go. Emma and I will have a girls' night." He'd returned the next evening to find his apartment transformed. Sarah and Emma had made homemade pizza, strung fairy lights across the living room, and fallen asleep on the couch with a movie still playing softly in the background. Emma was curled against Sarah's side, and Sarah's arm was wrapped protectively around his daughter, her face peaceful in sleep. Marcus had stood in the doorway for a long moment, his heart full of something too big for his body to contain. This, he'd thought, this is what I want. Not just for me, but for Emma. This warmth, this completeness, this sense of home that has nothing to do with walls and everything to do with the people inside them. Sarah had stirred, her eyes opening slowly. When she saw him, she'd smiled, sleepy and soft and unself-conscious. "Hey, welcome back. Hey," he'd whispered, not trusting his voice for anything more. She'd carefully disentangled herself from Emma, carrying his daughter to bed while he stood frozen in the kitchen, arguing with himself. Tell her now. She's here, in your home, caring for your daughter like she's her own. Tell her." But when Sarah had returned, she'd started talking about David. About how he'd proposed the week before. About the ring, vintage, her grandmother's style. About the wedding they were planning for the fall. And Marcus had smiled. He'd congratulated her. He'd opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for no particular occasion, and they'd toasted to her happiness while his own crumbled to dust inside him. "You'll come, won't you?" she'd asked. "You and Emma. I can't imagine the day without you both there." "Of course," he'd said, because what else could he say? That was 6 months ago. Now the wedding was 3 weeks away, and Marcus stood at his kitchen window. Holding cold coffee and a lifetime of words he'd never spoken. "Daddy." He turned to find Emma in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Hey, bug. Bad dream." She shook her head, patting over to lean against him. At 9, she was getting too big for this, but he wrapped his arm around her anyway, grateful for the weight of her, the realness of her. "You're sad about Miss Winters," she said simply. Marcus's breath caught. "What makes you say that?" Emma looked up at him with eyes far too wise for her years. "Because you love her. And you never told her." He couldn't lie to her. Had never been able to. "How did you know?" "I'm not a baby, Dad. I see how you look at her. The way you smile different when she's around." She paused, then added quietly, "I wished she could be my mom." The words hit him like a physical blow. "Oh, Emma, I know it's too late now," his daughter continued, her voice matter of fact in the way children's voices could be about heartbreak. "She's marrying Mr. David. But Daddy, why didn't you tell her? Aren't you always saying I should be brave and honest about my feelings?" Marcus knelt down to look his daughter in the eye, this perfect, perceptive creature he'd somehow been trusted to raise. "You're right. I should have been brave. I should have told her. I was scared." "Of what?" "Of a lot of things. Of not being enough. Of disrupting your life if things went wrong. Of losing her friendship if she didn't feel the same way." He touched her cheek gently. "Sometimes grown-ups are cowards, bug. Sometimes we let fear make our choices for us." Emma was quiet for a moment. Then, "My art teacher from last year, Mr. Peterson, he says that the art we don't make because we're scared is sadder than the art we make that turns out bad." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. "Mr. Peterson is a wise man. So maybe you should tell her anyway," Emma said. "Maybe it's too late for her to marry you instead. But at least she'd know. At least you'd be brave, even if it's scary." After he'd tucked Emma back into bed, Marcus sat in his darkened living room, his daughter's words echoing in his head. He thought about all the moments he'd swallowed his truth. All the times he'd chosen silence over risk. He thought about the example he was setting for Emma, teaching her with his actions that love was something to hide, that vulnerability was weakness, that the safe choice was always the right choice. He'd spent 7 years being brave in every way that mattered for his daughter. Working extra shifts to afford her art supplies. Confronting teachers when she was being bullied. learning to braid and cook and sew and understand preteen emotions. But he'd never been brave enough to fight for his own happiness. The cream-colored envelope still sat on the counter. Marcus picked it up, finally opening it. The invitation was beautiful, Sarah's artistic touch evident in every detail. The ceremony was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to decide if he could live the rest of his life knowing he'd let her go without ever fighting for her. 3 weeks to choose between comfortable silence and terrifying honesty. He couldn't go to that wedding and watch her marry someone else while carrying this secret. Whether she chose him or not, whether it changed anything or not, Emma was right. Sarah deserved to know. And he deserved to be brave enough to tell her, even if bravery came 7 years too late. Marcus pulled out his phone, his hands trembling as he typed, "Can we talk? Just the two of us. It's important." Asterisk. Her response came quickly, "Of course. Coffee tomorrow. 10 at our usual place." Asterisk. "Perfect. See you then." Asterisk. He set down the phone and walked to Emma's room, watching her sleep in the glow of her nightlight. Tomorrow, he would be brave. Tomorrow, he would speak the truth that had lived in his heart for 3 years. Tomorrow, he would show his daughter that love, even unrequited, even too late, was always worth the risk of honesty. Because in the end, the love we keep silent doesn't protect anyone. It just leaves us haunted by the words we never had the courage to say. And Marcus Chen was done being haunted. Whatever happened tomorrow, at least he would finally be free.